Assalamu alaikum. Здравствуйте. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are starting in 5 minutes. Thank you. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are starting our roundtable. You might take your seats and make yourself comfortable. Okay. Today, our topic is new education and future 50 plus years. Before we go into discussion of the topic, I'd like to introduce the panel speakers. which together with me participating today in this roundtable. As a first speaker, I would like to start with the only lady in our panel, Borina Andreu. She's currently managing director of Wilmot and Associates. Ms. Andreu has a diverse educational background of studying history at Louvre School, International Relations and Finance at the Institute of Politics in Paris, and Literature at Sorbonne. Ms. Andreu stated that knowing artificial intelligence makes it possible to boost and compare data, which is an excellent way to establish the best support for human intellect. And today, Ms. Andreu will illustrate this topic with the projects completed by her company Wilmot and Associates in different parts of the world. The second speaker is Rustam Karimjanov, Deputy Minister of Public Education of Republic of Uzbekistan. Mr. Karimjanov, before being appointed at the current position, served as a Director of Center for Innovation, Technology and Strategy under Minister of Public Education. He's graduate of Seoul University from South Korea, and I should admit he is one of the key people in driving education to new level of development in Uzbekistan. We have a third speaker from Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade. He's serving as a Deputy General Director of Strategic Development Agency, Mr. Alexei Sim. And Mr. Alexei Sim has an extensive public service experience at the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade in different positions. He's a graduate of the Banking and Finance Academy in Uzbekistan. And we have Muzaffar Jalalov, one of the most progressive rectors in Uzbekistan. He is currently heading Inha University in Uzbekistan. He used to work for many years in the technology sector as the Minister of Information and Communication Technologies of the Republic of Uzbekistan and the state-owned Center for Scientific and Technology Research called UNICON. He's graduate of Yunnan University from South Korea. And last but not the least, we have Sean Corey. Mr. Corey is a senior partner at the global management consultancy, Oliver Wyman. He's currently chairman of the Northern European business, including Central Asia. Mr. Sean Corey has over 30 years experience as an advisor working in North America, Europe, and Central Asia. He has advised several governments on the reformation of financial sector and worked with the executive board on strategy, risk management, and operational effectiveness. Okay, so today our topic is about education and the future in 50 years plus. So before I give the floor to our distinguished speakers, I'd like to highlight a couple of things about our today's topic. As all you know, currently we are living in a very complex environment and a complex world as of today, faced with a lot of global economic, social, and environmental issues. And the international community, as in general, is working over search for resources and financial solutions to achieve progress in these areas. The key to progress is to ability to think and act proactively, which is a key. And if we want to define the future, we have to analyze and try to understand what we will be doing in the future. And for prompt and effective adaptation of any country to new conditions, both challenges and possible changes, it's advisable to have a specific development and an action plan. International practice currently uses different methodological tools for long-term planning, such as a foresight and others. Forecasting tools on the use of extensive data and scenario analysis so far proving to be the most effective way. All these research and planning are aimed at increasing competitiveness, as well as a possibility of the most effective development of economic and social sphere. But the recent changes in geopolitical situation and in the world in general is proving that sometimes the even short study of the past or detailed analysis of technological analysis might not give the proper answer what we should be doing, not in a far future, but even in a distinct, very close one. So in today's discussion, we are going to elaborate on these topics and how we will be acting to preparing our societies, our governments, our ministries, in general, humankind, for all these challenges which are upcoming in the 50 years plus time. And the first floor, I would like to give the Mr. Rustam Karimjanov, Deputy Minister of Public Education of Republic of Uzbekistan, because currently all the topics we are discussing, in the center is still human capital. And when we're talking about human capital, we cannot avoid the issue of education. And education is a key point in many aspects, not only from the public education standpoint, but in general, in many spheres. But first, I would like to ask Mr. Karimjanov, what is currently the role of the Ministry of Public Education in preparing overall the nation for the new challenges we are currently facing now and we might face in the future? And what other opportunities do you see for Uzbekistan in the prospect of the 50 years plus? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear participants, dear friends, dear colleagues, first of all, let me welcome you in Uzbekistan and congratulate all the participants and everybody in Uzbekistan with the, I think, massive opening of first Tashkent International Investment Forum. I think everybody who attended yesterday's opening ceremony, including all of us, including myself, was positively surprised with the achieved goals and remembering all the achieved goals and of course the future goals we have in Uzbekistan. And all of us heard about our nation's goal for the future and social economic goals of Uzbekistan in 2022-2026, which will be basis for the upcoming 10, 20, and 30 years of developing our economy. And everybody knows that basis for developing the economy would be the education and human capital. So considering human capital as an asset of developing economy, not only for Uzbekistan, but for the worldwide, Uzbekistan is one of the most youngest countries in the world. We have nowadays 35 million people living in Uzbekistan and some more living abroad. So in coming 5 years, our population will be reaching 40 million, which means 60% of young generation will be around 25 million of young people. Nowadays we have 20, which means in coming 5 years we have additional 5 million young generation joining job market. So before preparing for today's presentation, we looked back into the history. Since we became independent, we analyzed what was the economical priorities of the country and what was the educational system based on these economical development goals. So the most popular working areas or economical areas for Uzbekistan in 1990s was agriculture, engineering, metallurgy, construction, transport, textile, and etc. So the jobs which require mostly the physical interference, physical work, and less intellectual work. Nowadays, if we look at our economy in 2020s, we are shifting and preparing our economy to leapfrog to the fourth industrial revolution. Yeah, it could be a very high goal. Not all the industries in Uzbekistan are even in the third industrial revolution nowadays, but this is the perfect opportunity for Uzbekistan to leapfrog from the second or mid-third to the fourth industrial revolution. And of course, nowadays we are preparing our school, we are adapting our school education into this, and also overall education system in Uzbekistan for this. And let me briefly explain what is the current status of school education in Uzbekistan. We have 10,130 schools throughout the Republic of Uzbekistan, and 6.2 million school kids. So this is from the first grade to 11th grade. So if you see, this is the biggest part of youngest generation of Uzbekistan, and every year we are helping to graduate over 650,000 school kids every year. So, and this number is changing year to year, so in terms of increasing. So, and the main tool we have in public education sector would be teachers. Why teachers? Because there is a perfect correlation between the quality education and the school graduates' education quality level is and the teacher's knowledge. So these two main objects we have to develop the education sector for the future, and also together with the history we look through, we also analyzed what would be economical situation, what would be the economical goal for the future in 2030, in 2050 years. So in 2030, we are approaching technologies and industries like artificial intelligence, 3D animation, 3D printers, virtual reality, and etc. So most of the modern technologies and modern knowledge which would be required. And if we look into the 2050, so we identified that smart house designer, web and mobile programmer, data detective, human-machine collaboration manager, algorithm error auditor, consultant on integration VR and AR. So these are the future technologies and future skills which will be required for the upcoming years, not only for Uzbekistan, but also for the world. So same seemed very strange when 10, 20 years ago we used terms like artificial intelligence, AI, VR, 3D, and etc. These terms also nowadays seems very, strange for me, for myself also. So, but nowadays terms like software engineer, algorithms, big data, also artificial intelligence, virtual reality are now a reality today. So what we should do in terms of education to prepare our kids to the future. And there are two big factors we are working on nowadays. Is first would be preparing kids for self-learning, and second would be preparing our kids for self-developing. Why these two critical skills we want to develop is because world is changing very fast, and it's almost impossible to predict what would happen in the coming 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, even tomorrow, because the pandemic situation taught us a lot of things. For the last 2 years, we faced many difficulties, many challenges, but I think we went through this. We went through of this situation also, I think, positively, but still we don't know what will be in the future. So if we come to today's conference subject, big data, as a role of big data in predicting the future education. I think if Mr. Botter allow me a couple more minutes, I'll try to explain what we are doing to what we are doing by using big data, what we are planning to do in the public education sector by using data, and how to develop our education strategy. So big data, as many of us know, is used for two things, specifically in the education sector. First one would be for process improvement for decision making. It's internal things. And the second one, big data is used for identifying educational strategy. So in terms of first one, before doing big data or doing decision making, first thing we need to have is proper and actual data information. So the first step would be collecting data, proper and actual data. And then in order to make a decision, of course, we need to have the tools to make proper decision, on-time decision. So for that, in a public education sector, we are working on several projects nowadays, which will help us to build proper strategy on education. Why this is important, I could explain you very simply. Before, we used to manage the schools and the school education system maximum on the level of regions, maximum. But with the help of information technology and big data, we are able nowadays to analyze the data of school students and teachers. Before, without advanced technology and big data, we were not able to do that. Because in the statistics, we have seen that, for example, any innovation or any changes in the education system, which is going vertically from Minister of Public Education and down to the school, needs to go through at least 7 or 8 layers. For example, we come from the minister, deputy minister, and then it goes to regional department, and then it goes to district level, and then information goes to the director, school principal level, then deputy school principal, and then teacher, and then school kid. So at least 7, 8 layers. Without use of technology, the effectiveness of doing changes in education sector equals to 10%. But with the usage of information technology and big data, nowadays we are reaching not 100%, unfortunately nowadays, but we are very close to 50% now. Because also there is also the role of human, like teachers and school kids participants. So the role of big data nowadays in the public education sector is very important. And also I just wanted to show you one real life example. So of using big data in public education sector. So here is the mobile application I have in my hand, and all the information about the school children, all the information about the performance of school teachers, all the information about the performance of the school management system, and everything is on my hand. Whether I am in Tashkent, whether I am in Malaysia, whether I am in any other part of the world, if I have internet, I'm aware of what is happening in school, how is the trends and everything. So, and I don't have to ask any information from any authorities in the place nowadays. Before, I was very easy to be, fooled easily. Nowadays, it's almost impossible to be fooled for the administration and higher level, which helps us nowadays to make proper and on-time decision making. So this is why big data, and this is why information technologies are very important in public education sector. And we are nowadays, except these information technologies, we are using other systems to analyze and predict the skills and knowledge of school kids. We have a couple of information systems called Maktabuz, S-Testing, and online do.uz, which helps to analyze the performance of each school teacher and help them to develop their, to set their individual development plan. Same with the school kids. So we separated this into 4 categories. First is school kids' knowledge level. Second is their skills for the nowadays skills set. Third is interests. And fourth is traditional and overall values in Uzbekistan, which is also very important. So these 4 dimensions, under this umbrella, we are developing our school education system nowadays. Same goes with the teachers. So in order to develop the school education and improve higher education, implement high educational standards for school kids, we are developing in parallel the teachers. We have separate program to develop school teachers. So if you give me 5 or 6 more hours, I can talk about it, but unfortunately we have very limited time, and I already talked too much. This is briefly what we have done, and if anybody is interested to get more information, detailed information, I will share my business card and share all detailed information. And thank you very much one more time for organizing this event and coming to this event. And taking this moment, I just wanted to say that Uzbekistan is open. Uzbekistan education system is also open for challenges, open for changes, ready to integrate to global economy and global education system. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Mr. Karamjan, thank you very much. Indeed, very impressed with the amount of work being done at the Ministry of Public Education. Just for the record, previously, Ministry of Public Education was regarded as one of the least developed ministries in the country. And when you refer to the public education, that was some sphere which was least paid attention at. But due to all these reforms currently taking place, and with all the young leaders in the ministry, we are seeing significant growth and changes in the ministry. And now I'd like to give the floor to Alexei Sim, and I would like to ask a question going back to the root of our today's discussion, when we discussed the fundamental science of calculations, which enables people based on a big data to predict, forecast in the future. So at the Center for Strategic Development, probably you are looking at the different aspects of this, how the big data could be analyzed and used to provide some strategic advices to the government, and how do you look into this topic in general, where you get the data and how you analyze? That would be interesting to know. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Батыр Эрджанов. Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа. Очень приятно, что данная панельная сессия проходит на первом Ташкентском международном инвестиционном форуме, который планировался очень давно, но прошел знаменательно, проходит сейчас в этом году в Конгресс-холле. Действительно, вопрос прогнозирования будущего, наверное, будоражит умы людей на протяжении очень долгого времени. И все люди, начиная от индивидов и правительств, они всегда пытались заглянуть в будущее и посмотреть, что же произойдет. И тот вопрос, который сейчас адресован, он говорит, основывается ли он может ли он быть основан на анализе больших данных. Очевидно, что предугадать детально и прямо буквально, что будет через 50 лет или через 30 лет, очень сложно. Но можно определить какие-то конкретные тренды, основываясь на анализе Big Data, и постараться в каких-то моментах минимизировать риски, а в каких-то моментах, наоборот, максимизировать тот эффект, которого мы можем достичь в той или иной ситуации. Я сейчас вспоминаю слова великого такого человека, Алан Гринспан, который долгое время руководил Федеральной резервной системой в Америке. Вот. Он говорил, что все кризисы, они разные, то есть по сути они все разные, но в основе каждого из них лежит то, что люди предполагают, что та благоприятная ситуация, которая происходит, она не иссякнет. И в какой-то момент происходит то, что она иссякает. И вот это вот прогнозирование 50+, оно должно минимизировать тот экстремум, когда этот кризис может возникнуть. И как мы можем из этого кризиса получить максимальную выгоду. То есть каждое правительство, оно стремится к этому. К примеру, Организация экономического сотрудничества и развития, она определила 4 ключевых направления, через которые страны и правительства, наверное, будут достигать наиболее качественной жизни для своего населения. То есть мы понимаем, что любая стратегия и любой анализ правительств, он стремится к тому, чтобы сократить время и сократить расход ресурсов. Что подразумевает? То есть это тот продукт, то есть инновации, будь то новые технологии, все стремится к тому, чтобы сократить время, сократить расход ресурсов и через это повысить качество жизни людей. То есть вот эти вот 3 тренда, я считаю, что в ближайшие 20-30 лет они будут преобладать. И все новые технологии, и все, что мы будем делать, это будет стремиться к этому. Я просто привожу пример того, что, например, в далеком 2010 или в 2012 году мы не подразумевали, что рынок электромобилей, он будет настолько большим. То есть по моим данным, то есть, которые я получил, в 2011 году рынок электромобилей составлял всего 45 тысяч автомобилей. То есть это было всего 45 тысяч автомобилей в мире. А уже в 2022 году мы прогнозируем то, что реализует 6 миллионов 300 тысяч автомобилей. То есть это цифры, которые просто заставляют задуматься и заставляют нас понять, что анализ данных, анализ прошлого очень важен. Очень важен для того, чтобы принимать решения в будущем. И также, если говорить о анализе больших данных, то здесь очевидно, что рынок больших данных в 2012 году составлял всего 8 миллиардов долларов. То есть можно сказать, что это была такая отправная начальная точка, а сейчас, то есть 2020 год, это уже 207 миллиардов, а 2021 это уже 231 миллиард. А в 2028 планируют, что рынок анализа больших данных, он достигнет 550 миллиардов. То есть мы видим, что мир стремится к анализу больших данных, а мир стремится к тому, чтобы сократить риски, сократить экстремумы, то есть из экстремумов выжить максимум. Где-то минимизировать риски, где-то получить большую прибыль. Поэтому анализ Big Data, он очень важен. И мы должны принимать его в расчет, когда мы говорим о сценарном развитии, когда мы говорим о долгосрочном планировании. Как я уже отметил, Организация экономического сотрудничества определила 4 тренда, то есть это в первую очередь это цифровые технологии, то есть это искусственный интеллект, это робототехника, квантовые вычисления, это анализ больших данных в том числе. А второе направление – это биотехнологии. То есть мы понимаем, и пандемия показала то, что биотехнологии и Big Data, они очень важны для нашего развития. То есть мы должны быть готовы к современным угрозам. Вот. И в том числе это нейротехнологии, это синтетическая биология, это энергетика, фотовольтаика. То есть это направления, те, которые будут в тренде в ближайшие 20-30 лет. Также немаловажно отметить, что энергетика играет огромную роль, и она является фундаментом нашего развития, потому что без оптимизации именно развития этого сектора будет очень сложно реализовать те планы, которые мы запланировали. То есть и ОСР говорит о том, что это водородная энергетика, да, это биотопливо. То есть это те направления, которые, например, Япония, Южная Корея поставили в свои стратегические планы на будущие 30 лет. То есть мы понимаем, что это тренд, и в этом направлении, конечно, нужно двигаться. Также это наноматериалы и графен, то есть это вот те материалы, которые в ближайшие годы, я думаю, будут пользоваться все большим и большим успехом. Если говорить о связи долгосрочного стратегического планирования с образованием, то здесь можно однозначно утверждать, что на текущий момент основной проблемой является то, что развитие промышленности, развитие экономики, оно зачастую не взаимосвязано с планами, с учебными планами, которые вырабатываются учебными учреждениями. И не всегда существует ясная и четкая взаимосвязь, потому что если мы хотим развиваться, то нам нужны кадры. Если мы хотим развиваться в биотехнологии, мы говорим, что в ближайшие 20-30 лет мы будем в лидерах, то, соответственно, нам нужны университеты, нам нужны институты, и нам нужно развиваться в этом направлении. И промышленность, экономика, она должна заказывать кадров. Она должна говорить, какие кадры ему нужны будут через 5-10 лет, через 15 лет. И эти кадры, они должны становиться фундаментом того развития, того или иного направления. Это ключевые вещи, которые необходимо поставить на рельсы и необходимо запустить, потому что без кадров нет будущего и нет тех технологий, которые мы запланировали. И, соответственно, все наши планы, которые мы строим, без четкой и ясной взаимоувязки кадров и их учебных планов, оно не даст нужного эффекта. Спасибо.
Спасибо за детальный ответ. Достаточно объемный, и мы вернемся еще несколькими вопросами, наверное, когда мы хотим уже упомянуть конкретно какие рекомендации, исходя из этих изучений, на сегодняшний день передаются правительству. And now I'd like to turn to Mr. Jalalov, since we already discussed the potential of the education and as Alexei Sim already mentioned, that there is a new trends in different new technologies which are coming now. And all of these technologies, when we're talking about them, we cannot talk about them without preparing our future generation in terms of educating them, preparing them for this. And you at your university probably looking into such trends as currently, if we in the past used to change our professional specialization 2 or 3 times during our lifetime, currently this number is about 10-15, and nobody knows how fast we will be changing our profession in the future. So today is programming, and tomorrow it's biotech and space engineering and something else. How do you think the higher education institution like yours should cope with this kind of challenges, and what is exactly being done at your level in the university in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Assalamu alaikum. Dear honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my huge honor to be part of such historical event, and I'd like to appreciate the Organization Committee of Tashkent International Investment Forum for kind invitation. Before I go through your question, I'd like to briefly mention about changes in higher education that happened last 5 years. As our president yesterday said on his opening speech, the number of universities increased from 65 to almost 140. Maybe it's just numbers, but there are huge work hidden behind such numbers. So the most important is the number of international and private universities is tripled. So now is a big trend is coming to Uzbekistan, and our president mentioned it 2 years ago in his strategy that Uzbekistan will become by 2030 the educational hub in Central Asia. So, and yesterday the Minister of ICT also mentioned that Uzbekistan will also become, according to the strategy, the IT hub by 2030. So I totally agree with you, the moderator. In this modern and fast-changing and dynamic world, people should learn to be adaptive and flexible for changes. In the world where every minute comes out new information, new technology, new trends, there are new challenges occur, like how to analyze all these big data. Which one is reliable? Which one is true or fake? Or can we only rely on artificial intelligence to analyze these big data? Well, there are lots of questions. I would like to say that I remember back almost even 15 to 20 years ago, we had the difficulties with accessing information, accessing to knowledge. I would like to say that the low-speed internet, expensive computer devices, and big box monitors, less available and hard to find books, and of course, travel cost to go to study abroad. But now we have a high-speed internet, cheaper and portable computer devices, online books, no need to travel to study. There are online degree and non-degree programs such as the Coursera or Udemy or Skillbox, or even no need to travel to work. Pandemic showed that remote offices or outsourcing is becoming very popular. So what young people need is goodwill and enthusiasm to study, I think. So we first have to start from this one and to learn and enthusiasm to learn something new. So we have to focus on teaching young generation to learn to work on themselves, as our Deputy Minister mentioned, hardly and with passionate. So we have to teach them to enjoy their work, to love what they're doing. So when we talk about future professions, I think even nowadays we can see that everybody must know how to use IT technologies. Now it's called as digital skills. So beside knowing and mastering own profession like doctor or engineer or finance, etc., knowing one or two foreign languages and digital skills are becoming mandatory, not optional anymore. So as Mr. Deputy Minister mentioned, virtual reality and augmented reality technologies will be widely used for education purposes, and it is being used now in the world, we can see. And in my opinion, even metaverse by Mark Zuckerberg will be broadly used for education purposes too. We're already seeing it. So there are really fantastic tools to teach students at schools and universities. Well, pandemic, the COVID-19 had forced people around the globe go online, including education sector. All the world has learned to use this Zoom platform. I hate it, and others too. So we all had to adapt into new reality and adapt the world that entered into new era. However, such a massive online or TV education also showed its backsides, let's say, disadvantages too. We noticed last 2 years especially, such as the not readiness of some countries, most countries I would say, and people to deploy and properly use of these IT technologies, IT tools, or lack of communication, eye contact, sense of space, and the monitoring problem, the quality assurance problem of education, and the most important, which is becoming recently, it's a verification and authentication problem, especially with the deepfake technology. So we cannot only rely on online. So in my view, in my humble opinion, I'd like to propose some ideas for, first of all, for schools, it doesn't matter public or private. Well, first is I think that we need more programming classes, especially from first class. Why I'm saying first class? Because as a university we already launched Scratch courses from 7 years old, and we see that almost 35 kids did their best to learn such, and it was so funny and so interesting to see, so happy their faces to see that it started moving, and they really was fascinating. So, and second is I think that the startup or entrepreneurship, how to start and do the business classes are, I think, also very important, because we see that the professions are changing, and people don't want to work for somebody, they want to work for themselves, and we see this kind of trend also coming. And next I would like to propose is logical and creative thinking classes at schools. I think it's very important, because in this modern world where there are lots of information in the internet, they have to know how to use these tools and how properly, or let's say start from the skills of doing presentation or how to create something new. And of course, green education I think is very important, because we're seeing this climate change problem, and it's really we're seeing this what kind of consequences it's bringing. So I think that for better, if we talk about 50 plus, I think first is that we also have to think about the climate issues, and in all disciplines we can use these virtual or augmented reality technologies too. Well, in higher education, well, I'm representing the higher education. I should not speak like this, but I think I'll try. First is hybrid education can be one of the solutions. I think that we cannot only wait 4 years to become the engineer, or traditional, for example, offline and online education can be combined, used like hybrid education. For example, lectures can be conducted online, but exams and group works and lab works are conducted offline, for example. Or traditional classical, we say, education plus industry. Now is a new trend is, for example, we talk about bachelor is a 4 years program, but if we can make it 2+2, 2 years at the university and 2 years in industry, and still getting the credits. I think this is one of the good proposals, is now getting very popular among other countries too. More co-working zones, startup acceleration, incubation centers, I think is very important. Still not all universities having, in the world there is a new trend coming, such as not only co-working but co-learning centers. Co-learning centers where students teach another students. Students who already working in some corporate projects can have some skills. So I think it's very important now when we talk about these co-learning centers too. The General Director mentioned that the university and industry close cooperation is crucial. I agree with it. I think that otherwise there is no point to produce or to such graduates. And especially if we talk about IT engineering, decreasing the bachelor degree from 4 years to 3 years, I think it's very important, because there is no use to extend one program so long and then we can finish it in 3 years, I think. I hope that my Korean partners is not listening it. Universities must learn to be flexible, more flexible and more to changes, and they have to optimize and change their curriculums and academic programs at least once a year from the demand of the global market. I think this is also very important, because we see the old programs, old disciplines, which is now changing for years. There's no such a profession, but we see universities that are still producing sometimes this kind of specialists. Well, these days, the higher or secondary education diplomas, I would like to stop by, is becoming less important. The reason I'm saying it, because the skills are becoming more important than just the diploma, especially in IT. So countries in the future will need more skill development centers, training and retraining centers, professional centers, IT academias, and they all have to be connected with industry and global market too. So, in my opinion, government agencies, and another opinion I would like to say is that government agencies in companies should gradually stop demanding higher education from IT specialists at least. They don't need higher education. It should be replaced with international certificates from Microsoft, Cisco, Oracle, or etc. So, and when we talk about sustainable development, it's also very important to continue removing gaps between inequality in accessing to education between cities or rural areas and physically well and disabilities and kids from healthy families or orphans. There should not be any inequality, I think. We all feel, we all mean elder people, and feel on our shoulders the responsibility for future generations. So, and we will contribute and do our best. So, in the finishing, in my last word, I'd like to, I was inspired of our president from yesterday's opening speech. He said, new era personnel or manpower are our greatest and the most expensive treasure of our country. Thank you very much.
Mr. Jalal, thank you very much for a very open discussion about higher education. Sometimes I ask myself to what extent a person has to be open to stand on the shoes of the rector of the technology university and at the same time claims that the technology skill doesn't require diploma. I appreciate your openness and being objective in this regard. Now I'd like to give the floor to Borina Andrew. So now we talked about technology, we talked about analyzing the data, we talked about the potential of the education in this, but talking about the future, we always try to visualize what the future is. And when we're trying to visualize the future, we usually think about the buildings, some skyscrapers, technology, running around, flying around, and all this. As a person who is involved in building the visualization of the future, how do you think we should try to put it in a way so we don't regret ourselves in afterwards that we did so much into progress, forgetting some parts, important parts of our life, like nature, our cultural differences, and things like that?
Thank you very much. You know, I've been enjoying this round table. First of all, this is the biggest round table that I've ever seen, but it's another story. So I think what Batir said, it's the most important thing in our life. It's the best asset ever. It's the human capital. So the human capital has to go to something that makes him, you know, grow in a good way. The second thing I heard is that we have to collect big data and interpret them in a way. So how are you sure that the big data that we are collecting are, what you said, real or fake, and the way we interpret it, it's going to be fundamental for the future. The third thing, which for me is very important, it's the flexibility, the modularity, and the adaptability of everyone. So what's the situation today? We have 2% of the earth, it's occupied by cities. All the rest, it's something else. Villages, nature, abandoned areas, etc. We concentrate the population, like between 55 and 58% of the population, it's concentrated in the cities. Those cities, we eat like 75% of the energy that it's needed for that. So, what's our future? Big skyscrapers, you know, I was watching the Star Wars, you know, some times ago, for the first time in my life, by the way. And I said, I don't want to live that in this time. I don't want to live in this future. Our future, it has to be very, very responsible. And what's about, you know, education, architecture, putting people together, it's how to make our life better. And this is the crucial point. When, you know, Muzaffar spoke about Meta, we have right now the big chance, it's quite confidential, I'm not going to reveal the project, but we are redesigning Mark Zuckerberg's office in Menlo Park with the whole thing. So you see that all those people that are trying to put the metaverse in kind of to become a reality, they still live in quite a conventional way. What does it mean? It means that we have two solutions: to live in a city that we feel comfortable in, or to gain new areas. I had prepared a kind of presentation that I would send to every one of you if you wish. It's just, I think there are two aspects. One is to improve what we have. I mean, to develop the city on the city, meaning that to make it more sustainable, more smart in all way of vision of this word smart. It's not only to know where the bus is coming, but to have a very good public transportation, that you are not more far than half an hour from your work, that your kids live in and play in a very nice environment. This could be achieved within the existing city, by gaining new areas, by improving all these kind of economic issues that we have. And then we can develop something else, but always with same principle: how to give a better life to people. So I will give you one example, and which is related with education. We created and I was talking to the minister just before, we created in Paris 5 years ago in an abandoned railway station for wholesale and goods, the biggest in the world incubator for startups. You have 1,000 startups, 3,000 young people in one building, which has the size of the Eiffel Tower, 310 meters length, 50 meters depth, and divided in three areas. One is our Silicon Valley, but extremely concentrated. So they have place that is some semi-public. They meet people, they see their lawyers or their future customers. There is one central park which is extremely secured because this is the way they create and etc. And there is the third park called Chill, so there is a restaurant open 24 hours a day. So the combination of all this related to the town makes that those people are not isolated first. Very often they are people that used to produce or to create in their mom's garage space or something like that. We put them together because without any social contact, we cannot do it. So as you said, by Zoom, we can learn, we can discuss, but we are all here together to meet face to face, and nothing can replace that. We can travel less to be responsible for less CO2 emissions. We can, but we cannot avoid to meet. So I can talk like you at least for 5 or 6 hours, but everyone is most welcome to meet with me afterwards. But I think we have to refurbish what we have in the cities, to repair, to do some sewing, and then when we do new things, we do, for instance, now the UN building in Senegal. It's the new headquarters for the United Nations, but we do a new city around, which is like a chart, how not to repeat the mistakes from the past. So how to have lots of green space, how to have lots of, smooth kind of transportation, electrical or not, and how to combine mixed uses, because we cannot do ghettos anymore, you know, just buildings for working and buildings for sleeping and no relation. Everything should be mixed. So the future is human, mixed, and sustainable, I think.
Thank you very much. It's very delightful to hear from someone who is responsible to create our environment in the future, to such a nice words that we will not be living in a concrete, glass, and steel environment, and will be limited to technology only. Appreciate it. Thank you. And now I'd like to address Sean Corey. We discussed now technology and how we are going to try to use the technology in our daily life. We're trying to use big data to analyze our past, to understand what we're going to do in the future. And in a lot of extent, we're using machinery, artificial intelligence, technology to replace manpower, human interaction, and a lot of other things. So like for example, in a book by, I just was telling you before, by Noel Hariri, Homo Deus, he was talking about some potentially segment of population which might emerge in the future after so many jobs being replaced by technology, that people will be not needed, not only because of the they're not uneducated, but they might be even overqualified, but simply their job is already replaced by machinery. So in this context, what is a fine line we should try to think to give it to the machinery or not? Or should we take it easy and just keep on outsourcing, or we should sit and reconsider that? Where is the borderline?
Thanks, Piotr, for the question. And first, I'd like to thank the forum for inviting me to speak. It's a great honor to be here. I think your question, however, and I'll come back to an example, is a good example of the dilemma that society faces today, in that the rapid change in technology is going faster than us as individuals or society can make sense of. And I'll back up and think about the question you just asked. We looked at, we fundamentally think that it underestimates the capacity of the human species to be flexible, to self-learn and self-develop, as Rustam was describing the education system here in Uzbekistan to be. And a great example is automated teller machines, right? They were implemented in the 1970s with the idea to eliminate the bank teller. And if I asked people in the room today, they probably don't go to see the bank teller as often as they did in the past. But when they go to see the bank teller, they probably don't get cash, right? They get advice, they get interaction. There's an event in their life where they need to have some advice, and they're going to go to the bank teller to have that conversation, rather than going to cash a check or to take money out. And the point I want to make there, and I'll come on to some technologies, if you think about 50 years in the plus, that we have to get ourselves prepared for, is the simple job may be eliminated by artificial intelligence, and ATM is a great example of specific artificial intelligence, right? As we move to general artificial intelligence, as the book that you described, what will be the role of humans in that, and how will we interface, and what will actually our role be? So if you think of 5 technologies along those lines, one is telepathic communication. If you think about it today, there are a couple of companies that are working on trying to use nanobots to basically interface our mind to the network, right? And the idea of singularity, it comes up quite often in that. So sometime, if you roll forward 50 years, you're going to have an interface of, the internet will actually be a collection of minds rather than what it is today, which is a bunch of knowledge put into a system, right? You combine that with the idea of machine vision, right? Which is basically being developed today, the cities of the future. Anytime that you have a presentation about the city of the future, what you see is autonomous vehicles moving people from point A to point B, correct? Another great example of artificial intelligence. It eliminates the truck driver, it eliminates the taxi driver. Yandex, well, obviously they're testing, will have to change what they're doing. And then the other that was brought up by a couple of speakers, real virtual reality, right? In the future, what they'll have done is actually replaced our real sensories and replace that with artificial induced sensories, right? So I can sit in my home in Stockholm and interact with you here in Tashkent in the forum and feel like I'm actually in the room with you, right? Rather than traveling as I've done to get here. Another one we've touched on, which will, again, if you think about what will our role be, is will we as a society, by I guess 2050, most governments, Uzbekistan is one of them, really come to net zero? That is the fundamental question, I think, that bothers most people. What's happening in the background that we don't talk about at all, except for, I guess it was the Summer Olympics in Beijing a number of years ago, is geoengineering, right? Will our children's children spend most of their life without seeing a clear blue sky or the stars? Because somebody in the background is working on how do we change. And the last is food production, right? Being here in Uzbekistan, it was one of the fundamental drivers of the economy for so long. You're clearly in a process of changing from an agricultural to a knowledge base. But at some point in the future, if you are I think it's a Star Trek fan rather than Star Wars, molecular assembly, right? Today we do manufacturing through 3D printing. There was a session on it earlier. Tomorrow we'll produce, if we have carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, we'll produce food, right? Through molecular assembly. We'll be able to push a button and it will pop whatever it is that we want, right? So this fundamentally eliminates many jobs that people have today, right? But the question that I ask, and I don't think, which is where we as educators and the government come into play, I don't think it actually creates this set of society who chooses not to do something. It may provide greater optionality for people to choose not to do something, but for those who choose to do things, it will not do it. And the opportunity here is obviously technology creates new markets and creates vast wealth, right? We've seen that. But we as the educational system, the government, need to channel that so it doesn't just accrue to select enclaves, right? And we minimize the negative side effects, right? And one solution, which is you've talked around but not really directly at, is creating clusters of talent and capital, right? Once you get those together, you create a climate of innovation. And I would expect in Uzbekistan, as we talk over the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see different clusters being formed through the universities, through the development of the government, through your academy, through different clusters identifying opportunity. And the government's role is fundamental here, right? This gap isn't going to close on its own, right? As good as we in the private sector would like it to happen, it's not going to happen without some government intervention. And the government needs to play the role of the catalyst for the learning effect, right? Very much like Rustam was describing, right? There's a role there for the government to ensure that the learning effect takes place. We regulate to ensure that the benefits of technology change are achieved and the downside of them are managed. I think solar panels is a wonderful example, right? The German government many years ago led basically the development of solar panels, right? Chinese, through basically applying Wright's law, led manufacturing costs to get lower and lower and lower today. So the combination of German foresight and Chinese foresight, you now have solar panels that are accessible to the masses, right? It didn't happen just by the private sector. And then finally, besides that, a couple of good examples, right? the Estonian government a number of years ago went all digital. You now have everybody in Estonia believes in their digital ID, right? The trust in the technology is there, so everybody has adapted and believed it. Similar to the conversation we've been having here, Taiwan believes that digital skills are a common good, right? It's not just for the technologists. Back to what Mithra was describing, everybody in the society should have technology skills. And then Singapore, as a government, as was been described before, is an early adopter, forcing the private sector to adopting as quickly as possible. These are all small, developed economies. But if you think about where are we today in Uzbekistan, you're a small developing economy where you have the opportunity to actually harness these and over the next 50 years be able to manage both the ability to ensure that we keep people employed and busy on internally satisfying value activities. Because the world you describe actually creates quite a bit of problems for society if everybody's sitting around idle. And I believe that we will get there at one point, and I think things like that, there's good examples of why it's just an underestimated of the human capacity to adapt and change and be flexible. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koi. Very interesting insights, and thank you for drawing the conclusions. Since we have another 10 to 12 minutes, I'd like to I have other questions to ask my such a good speakers. I have a lot of questions to ask actually, but I'd like to give the opportunity for our guests in the room to approach with any questions if you have. So if you have any, we can just base the rest of the discussion on one or two questions. If not, I can proceed with my own questions. Yes, please. Can someone provide the microphone? Yeah, I would appreciate the people who are asking questions to introduce yourself, and then I will ask, and our esteemed panel speakers, I'd like to give the short answers because I guess we have a couple of other raised hands. Please.
My name is Claude Begley. I'm a former member of the Swiss Parliament, and we are here with the company Swiss New Water, which is in the innovation, trying to bring new ways of sanitation, public hygiene, preventive medicine in an ecological way. The question is, we have, of course, developed technologies. We have ready-made products. In our case, we want to invest in Uzbekistan and bring one of the machines which are ready-made. But we would like, on top of that, do something else. We would like to work maybe with the government and the UN and public agencies to define what are really the needs. For example, how can we work on fertilizers which would be less polluting? How can we work on water treatment? So what would be the needs? We would like to bring some of our technologists from Europe, from universities in Europe. Also, we have a development center in India with quite bright people. And we would like to create something like a triangle between scientists of Europe, people from India, scientists as well, and people from Uzbekistan, in order to develop something which is not only the technology exists, but which is adapted to the need of Central Asia. So my question is, who would be the right partner to be with us in that triangular development with scientists from Europe, from India, but people from here, and do the development after the investment, after the export?
Thank you for the question. I guess we will ask Alexei Sima, as the only person who is representing the government, try to address the question, if you can, to a point, who would be the possible counterpart in this interaction.
Спасибо большое, что приехали на этот форум. Очень приятно, что швейцарская делегация здесь присутствует в таком широком своем, широкое присутствие швейцарской делегации. И действительно, отношения Узбекистана со Швейцарией в части развития, в части улучшения ситуации с водными ресурсами, развития их, это такое стратегическое направление. И я считаю, что здесь нужно будет сотрудничество наших местных организаций, ответственных за это направление, то есть это УСУФ, Таминот, в том числе Агентство стратегического развития тоже готово обсудить с вами те направления сотрудничества, которые вы видите, и, соответственно, определить какие-то общие направления для дальнейшего сотрудничества. Будем рады содействию. Спасибо.
Yeah. I was just told we're running out of time. If you have any questions to our speakers, I would like to ask the people who have the questions approach the speakers directly right after we finish the panel. As a conclusion for our panel today's discussion, I'd like to draw just one or two words of the conclusion. So from what I heard today is very important couple of things is that as Mr. Karimjanov mentioned, that number of people at the schools is increasing, and we will be having more than 25 million by 2040. That's a huge amount of people, and we definitely have to pay a lot of attention to the public education, and that's good that you're doing this from the angle of self-learning and self-developing. Another thing I heard from Alexei Simi is that despite of all the challenges currently we are having now, government is trying to see the way how to maximize the potential outcomes from this crisis, and try to see what kind of advantages of any developments we currently are facing. Very detailed discussion in terms of higher education, and we can draw several conclusions on that. The most thing is I heard is about hybrid education probably will be prevailing with combining the on-job practice with education, and also the essence of the diploma is decreasing year by year. Before I move to conclusions by Borina, I would like to mention that Sean Corey mentioned that some works cannot be replaced, and in some places automation basically increased number of people being involved. So we have to look carefully in this. And most importantly, I like the statement by Borina and Drew is that whatever future we are building, we have to bear in our mind that it has to be human-centric. I guess this is a very good conclusion for our today's roundtable. Thank you very much for your deep insights and sharing your thoughts on this. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you.